In this recording, we'll discuss osseous tissue. Your bones, or your osseous tissue, is primarily found in the bones themselves. That will not shock anybody. They are composed of extracellular matrix with a few scattered cells throughout the tissue. Now, the extracellular matrix has two main components that are pretty unique. We have an inorganic and an organic matrix. Keep in mind, organic, anything, we have carbons and hydrogens involved. Inorganic, anything, we do not have the carbon-hydrogen bonds that you find in organic substances. So that's the big difference there. Your inorganic matrix, that is the minerals that you are most familiar with, including the calcium. That's about 65% of the bone's total weight. The other 35% is the organic matrix itself, and a lot of this comes from collagen fibers, and then the normal extracellular matrix components that we have mentioned way back in the histology recordings. Now, that inorganic matrix, okay, we said that was those minerals. The most predominant mineral would be calcium salts. The calcium stored within your bones accounts for about 85% of all of the calcium that you have in your whole body. And you also have a large amount of phosphorus. Now, we hear about calcium a lot, and you will continue to hear about calcium a lot. It's used in a lot of different processes in the body. Phosphorus, however, we don't talk a whole lot about phosphorus, but we use phosphorus all the time, that we're making DNA, RNA, ATP, all of those have phosphorus groups in them. Now, the calcium and the phosphorus, they basically combine to make a larger molecule called hydroxyapatite crystals, or calcium hydroxyapatite. And this is the fancy chemical formula. You've got the calcium and the phosphorus there. These crystals are what make the bone very hard, okay? And they make it very strong and resistant to the compressive forces that we put our bodies through on a daily basis. This allows the bones to be both protective and supportive. Okay. Now, calcium and phosphorus, that makes up those apatite crystals, so that's what you hear about a lot. But there are a couple of other components of the inorganic matrix. For example, a little bit of bicarbonate, a little bit of potassium, magnesium, sodium. Those are also found in this inorganic matrix as well. Now, the organic matrix. Okay, sometimes you'll hear this termed osteoid. You've got protein fibers here, proteoglycans, glycosaminoglycans. Okay, collagen. Okay, we've been talking about collagen for a while now. This is the predominant protein fiber within the bones themselves. They form crosslinks with one another to help prevent torsion or twisting forces, as well as tensile or pulling and stretching forces. Okay, so every time you move, you're going to twist and pull on the muscles, which are then pulling and twisting on the bones. And we would prefer if this did not cause our bones to break. So the collagen actually plays a pretty big role in bone health. The collagen fibers also align themselves with the hydroxyapatite crystals to further enhance the hardness of the bones. So they work together there. And then the glycosaminoglycans and the proteoglycans, just in case you have forgotten their functions, they are creating osmotic gradients which draw water into the osteoid itself, which acts as a cushion to help resist compressive forces. Okay, so we have a little bit of cushion in our bones as well. Now, if we take normal bone and we remove the organic matrix, the collagen, your bones become very brittle. They shatter very easily. If instead we remove the inorganic matrix that was making them hard, they become very bendy. They cannot resist compressive forces. And I think it goes without much discussion that we don't really want either one of these situations. We don't want brittle bones, and we don't want floppy bones either. And so we are grateful for both of these components. we have three main types of bone cells that we'll discuss. And remember, these bone cells, we can find them most predominantly in the end osteum. We threw that word around a little bit ago. Okay. Bone is alive. Bone is dynamic. Bone is always changing. We're always building a little bit and maybe breaking a little bit down somewhere else. And these three cells are what help us achieve that. We've got osteoblasts, osteocytes, which kind of look like spiky little things, and then osteoclasts are these giant cells with their multiple nuclei. And they kind of look like, I don't know what this little fringe looks like. Overall, it kind of looks like a mustache. All right, so osteoblasts. These are metabolically active bone cells. You find these in both the endosteum and the periosteum. And their job in life is to build bone. Osteoblasts build bone. Okay. Where do they come from? They come from cells known as osteogenic cells. Okay. These are a type of cell that will differentiate into osteoblasts when they receive the proper chemical signals. Okay. When they do the bone deposition, it does include both the secretion of the organic matrix materials, okay, and they assist in the formation of the inorganic matrix as well. Okay, so remember, it was important for us to have both the organic and the inorganic components. Our osteoblasts do a little bit of both of that. Now, osteocytes, okay, the one with the little spikies on them. These osteocytes used to be osteoblasts, okay? The osteoblasts, as they start building bone, they basically surround themselves within the bone matrix, and they build themselves little houses, okay? We call those the lacuna or the lacunae, whatever term you prefer, okay, however you want to pronounce that. Once they become osteocytes, once they build their houses, they basically retire. They are no longer actively synthesizing bone matrix. They're no longer actively making new bone. Okay? So they work their whole lives as osteoblasts. When their house is finished, they retire and they become osteocytes. Now, here is what's interesting. Okay, so if you can imagine yourself retiring, okay, the day after you retire, the week after you retire, okay, maybe even a month or a year after you retire, you haven't exactly forgotten how to do your job, okay, and neither have these osteocytes. So although they are not metabolically active, they can become metabolically active again, okay, if we need them to. Okay, if we need them to help maintain the extracellular matrix. So retired but still capable of working. If we need their help, we can coax them out of retirement to do a little bit more work for us. They also appear to have the ability to recruit more osteoblasts, okay, to sites that we need to reinforce. If we start putting bones under extra tension and extra pressure, we can recruit more osteoblasts to reinforce certain areas in the bones. And here's kind of what we start off with, these osteogenic stem cells. Okay, this is kind of what they look like. Here we go. These are what they originally look like. Then they start differentiating into the osteoblasts. Okay, the osteoblasts are starting to create the matrix, and they're starting to surround themselves. And when it's all said and done, the osteocytes, they get that little spiky shape, and the little house that they have built themselves, the lacuna, is finished. Last but not least, we have the osteoclasts. Okay. These look quite a bit different than the osteoblasts and the osteocytes, and they have a completely different function. Osteoclasts, okay, are multinucleated, And how did they get that way? Once upon a time, these used to be individual cells, and we have fused them together. Okay, and when we fused them all together, everybody brought their nuclei. Okay, so we ended up with one larger nucleated cell. Okay, we have several of these. These are responsible for breaking down bone. We call this bone resorption. Okay, so building bone was bone deposition. Breaking down bone is bone resorption. Okay. Now, we've already learned that bone is composed of two main products. We've got organic and inorganic matrix. Osteoclasts use hydrogen ions, or acid, basically, to break down the inorganic matrix, the hard calcium apatite crystals. The enzymes from the osteoclasts break down the organic matrix, the collagen fibers. Okay. Now, once we break down the bone, when we do the bone resorption, okay, all of those little substances, okay, that we have freed from the bone, we can release those into the blood. Okay, and this includes nutrients, minerals, amino acids, sugars, all kinds of good stuff in there. We can put them into the blood. We can reuse them. Okay, hopefully your body loves to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay, or if we have excess, we can just excrete them as waste products. Okay, so we have some options there. Now, the histology of the compact bone tissue looks quite a bit different than the histology of spongy bone tissue. Okay. And the different histological components really lends themselves to the different functions that we see for the compact and the spongy bone that we've already mentioned. Okay. So compact bone. This is the part of the bone that is continuously subjected to lots of stress, lots of strain, lots of compressive forces. Okay. You must be able to withstand all these forces, preferably without permanently damaging or even breaking your bones. That would be bad, right? So your bone is built, your compact bone specifically, is built in a certain manner to help resist all of that stress, so we don't just break our bones all the time. So cross section. Okay, we've got our cross section here. If you use your imagination, okay, you gotta use your imagination. If you use your imagination, you look really hard. These look like trees, okay, tree trunks. All right, so imagine we've cut the top of the tree off, and this is the trunk. Okay, these systems, these big systems, are called osteons or Haversian systems. I'm just going to call them osteons. Okay, you will notice that just like a tree trunk, it has layers. We have rings. These rings are called lamella. Okay, we've got lamella that compose an overall osteon. Okay, we've got tons of osteons arranged in this pattern that form your compact bone. Okay, so each osteon, we've got anywhere from about 4 up to about 20 lamella in those concentric circles, those concentric lamella. Okay. The lamella are very stress resistant. Okay, so again, what is our overall purpose? Our overall purpose of the arrangement of the lamella, the creation of the osteons, the composition of both the organic and the inorganic matrix, one of the biggest functions is to keep your bones from breaking. Okay, and generally we're pretty good at that. Okay, we know we're not perfect. Every once in a while we might break a bone, but on a day-to-day basis, we're pretty good at that. Okay, those collagen fibers, okay, from neighboring lamella run in opposite directions of each other. Okay, this helps with the resistance to the twisting and the bending forces. Okay, because if you think about all of the movements you do on a daily basis, you don't just move in an X plane, you don't just move up in a Y plane, you move in 3 dimensions. Okay, and your bones have to be able to not break every time you switch directions. Okay. Now, where am I going? Come back. All right, the one osteon, okay, or one giant tree trunk. In the middle, we have a central canal. Okay. That central canal is lined with endosteum. And you will notice that we got a couple of interesting things in here. We've got some veins, arteries, and nerves. Okay. This is how we are going to start feeding and innervating your bones. Again, your bones are alive. They need nutrients, they need to remove wastes, and we need to be able to talk to them through our nerves. You will notice, we've got osteocytes within the lacuna. This is what basically creates the lamella. You'll see them lining the outer and inner portions of the lamella, okay, and all of these rings. And if you look really, really hard, you're going to put your glasses on, everybody, you'll see all these little tiny lines. These little tiny lines are called canaliculi. These are little tiny, tiny passageways, okay? You are basically connecting every osteocyte to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Everybody's connected. This allows us to take all of the nutrients from this artery, and we can send all of that through these little canaliculi to make sure that all of these osteocytes are getting all of the oxygen and nutrients they need, and we can take up all the waste products and send them back through the vein. Okay, so this allows for shared resources, and it helps speed up communication between cells. Now, osteons are not permanent structures. This should make sense because your bones are not permanent structures. We are constantly using osteoblasts and osteoclasts to modify your bones. Okay. The osteoblasts are going to rebuild bone matrix depending on the needs of the body and the bones themselves. So if we have excess calcium that we can store, your osteoblasts are going to go to work and start creating more bone matrix. Okay. You will notice that we have both circumferential lamella, okay, on the outermost circumference of the bone, and then we have interstitial lamella that are on more of the interior portion of the long bones. Okay. Now, you'll notice that we also have, in addition to the central canals that we talked about in the center of the osteons, each osteon, you'll notice that we've got some extra blood vessels and nerve fibers. These run through perforating canals. Sometimes you'll hear them called Volkmann's canals. These vessels and nerve fibers run at right angles. They're perpendicular to the central canals, but the function is the same. Okay, so you already know that diffusion limits the thickness of any kind of tissue. And so anytime we are concerned about certain parts of tissues perhaps not getting the adequate supplies that they need, we have other ways to feed them. Okay, and so this helps ensure that this region gets blood, this ensures that this region gets blood, so on and so forth. Now, spongy bone. Your spongy bone is usually not really weight bearing like your compact bone, and so we don't have those osteons to speak of here. Instead, we have these struts. They're called trabeculae. Okay, but even though we're not weight bearing, okay, it's not like these are super fragile. Okay, they are still bone, so they are still hard. But instead of helping us with the linear forces that we keep mentioning, these help with resisting forces from several different directions. Remember we talked about the idea of moving in 3 dimensions? Okay, we need to be protected from or in all 3 of those dimensions. Now, we don't have osteons, but we do still have lamella. Okay, they're just not nice round tree trunks this time. Okay, we call them struts or ribs of bones. Okay, you'll notice that we don't have a central canal here either, but we do still have the canaliculi. So all of these cells are still sharing resources and they're still in communication. But since we don't have the central canals, the blood supply is a little bit different. Instead of having the main arteries coming from the central canals, instead we're now getting nutrients from the bone marrow. Because if you remember, okay, this type of region at the epiphyses, this is where you're going to find all that red marrow. Well, what are you doing in red marrow? You are making new blood. So we do still have plenty of resources to go around. They're just going to get to these cells in a different way. That concludes our discussion of osseous tissue.